Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast where we inspire growth, beat down biases, and get into all sorts of good trouble, with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
No topic is off limits as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
So get ready to join us for some courageous conversation, because Not Going Quietly starts right now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Not Going Quietly, the podcast for outraged optimists and heartbroken healers all over the world, where we have courageous conversations and surface searing truths in the name of radical togetherness. I'm your host, Britt East, and I am here with my fantabulous co-host, Jonathan Beal. Jonathan, how the hell are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. We're experiencing summer in the UK, like the 3 days of summer that we have. So it's all going to be over soon, but it's good. And I went to Pride, London Pride at the weekend, which was fantastic. That's fun. Always fun to see everybody just enjoying themselves and, standing up for us.
And so important right now, too, with all of the heartache and, all we're going through in the world, to have some time to replenish and feel joy, especially queer joy, and really bask in that togetherness. I think that's wonderful. The heat actually came on the other day here. It's like 2 days ago, the heat was on. It's July when we're recording this. And
Seattle.
I live in Seattle. Jonathan lives in the UK. And that's like Arctic tundra wasteland. So, I'm a little jealous of your sunshine, but hopefully one day here summer will strike. We never know. But we have our own ray of sunshine today. We have a very special guest, the delightful Jody Kuehner, my dear friend from Seattle. So she feels my pain with the doom and gloom weather that we've been experiencing recently, and she's just a brilliant performer who's been a local luminary here for quite a while at this point, and a dear friend of mine, and somebody I'm so excited to chat with and to introduce to our audiences. Jody Kuehner, aka Sherdana Shinatra, uses dance, drag, theater, comedy, camp, pop culture, feminist traditions, absurdity, and subversive commentary to make art. 18 years ago, Jody landed in Seattle, where she fell in love with its rowdy, postmodern dance culture. Me too. She devoured everything experimental and improvisational and fell in love with her own queerness. Me too. In doing so, Jody created Sherdana Shinatra as a persona and character to question herself and explore the world from a uniquely queer perspective. Sherdana's innocent and childlike personality spreads the love we need to become a better society, but at the same time exposes all the fucked up ways we treat each other. By examining the polarity and proximity of joy and sadness, excitement and fear, and the idea you can love something so much you can hurt it, together with her cartoon drag meets David Lynch aesthetic, her work as Sherdana acts as a vehicle for social change, political action, and radical commentary. Jody, we are so excited to have you on the podcast today. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be here and do this.
Awesome. What I want, because I've known Sherdana for years and years, so she's really clear in my mind. Our audience, in many cases, won't have met her. And so I want to kind of continue to introduce her. Now, obviously, we're going to put your website in the show notes, and I encourage everybody to go to Jody's website so they can see exactly who Sherdana is in the gallery and by watching the videos that are posted on that website. And then I'll help it make it all come together, I think. But let's continue to kind of introduce your alter ego, Sherdana Shinatra. So what I've done is I've plagiarized some of the description, the copy on your website, because it was so brilliantly written, and I think it describes Sherdana so well. So I'm just going to kind of read some more as we talk about who Sherdana is, so our audience can kind of start to visualize her. So your work as Sherdana has been described by various people as a perversely vulnerable and childlike clownsplosion, which is a great word, bizarre and occasionally discomfiting, luxuriates in the trappings of high femme expressions, Sherdana takes what you recognize about dance, what you believe about drag, what intrigues you about improvisation, and what delights you about entertainment, and effortlessly tosses it in a mason jar, shakes it up, and opens the lid. Sherdana exists between dimensions and quantum shifts in time through everyday objects and emotions, while she provides a brightly decorated avenue to explore and question what is normal. She remains a child, innocent of rancor. Sherdana is aggressively sweet. The subtext is this made-up surface belying what exists beneath in the commentary of truth beyond what's advertised. She is always seeking what is beautiful and shiny. She lives for the light. Now, Jody, tell us more about who Sherdana is, how she came to be, what it's like performing as an alter ego, what you can do as Sherdana that you can't do as Jody. Just kind of paint a fuller picture for us.
Yeah, well, it's been a very organic process. I'm a dance-based person. I mean, I came up in dance, so I was like, I'm going to be a dancer. I'm going to move to New York. I'm going to dance for one of the big companies like Lamone, or that was really my track. And I moved to Seattle and started to do stuff here. And just like that description said, Seattle became just such an amazing place to grow as an artist. And it was really, the queerness here was very exciting. I mean, I came from Florida, so, you know, it was a really different, a really different situation. And I feel it's really funny to move from a place like that to Seattle, because I feel like Seattle gets very down on itself, where everyone's like, Seattle sucks. It could be so much better. And like, there's this energy here where everyone's pushing for more, which I love. And also, I sometimes get like, has anybody been anywhere else? Like, we're doing pretty good. Like, we're doing pretty good. You know, going to school in Florida, I was like, this was a dreamland to be here. So anyways, the way into Sherdana really just started with, I never was like, I want to be a drag character. It really started from just wanting to explore different aspects about myself, and through dance, and this idea of, at the time, modern contemporary dance was very stripped down. It was like, you just wear cotton pants with a cotton loose tank top. And it was kind of like, what do you do if you put aesthetic on that? Like, how much does it change the work if you actually put some high aesthetics, some like drastic costuming or drastic set design or installation? Just adds another layer. And I'm totally down for that, you know, that type of modern, like, great. There is something about, like, the ideas were just stripped down and we're just a body in space. Cool. And also for me, I was just got more excited about upping the aesthetics to create more context and layering in the work. And then within that, there was a moment for me where, I mean, way back a million years ago, I was much more of the, like, I'm androgynous, queer human, because I need to, I mean, mainly because of feminine visibility. I was like, I need to be seen as a queer person. Like, how am I ever going to date or find my community if I look like a straight woman? And so my personal aesthetic, you know, was influenced by that, even though I love high femme aesthetics. And so Sherdana was a way for me to get to express that part of me and still be seen and part of my queer community. And through that, you know, I've been able to sort of, I mean, as we all grow in our aesthetics through our lives, but, you know, it's been, I feel like the line between Sherdana and myself is not, you know, like Dina Martina and Grady the human, they are like, we are different, and you don't mix the two at all. And for me, I'm like, I don't know, I'm just more Sherdana some days and more Jody other days, and vice versa. Like the lines are a little bit muddier for me. And so, yeah, I just started making work and dabbling in this character. And honestly, in the beginning times, people were like, "You're a drag queen," and I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm just a dancer using a like." I was pretty resistant to it. I don't really know why. I think it was because I had such a big identity in being a dancer, and that felt very important to me. That I was very wanting to be very clear. Like, no, I am a dance artist, and yes, I'm pulling from these different forms, but like, don't put me in that category. So that's Lucent, that's Lucent, but that's kind of where I started. And so a lot of the, being part of the drag community was like a little bit of a push for me. I was pretty much, like in the beginning, I hated doing club gigs. I was like, just not into it for so many reasons. And I figured out my way into it now, and figuring out how to like, be able to make work or have my art in different containers, the container of a club or the container of a theater or a museum. And that's really now where my interest has gone towards full force, where I'm like, what are all the venues that this work can be contained in? And then how does that change the work and all the different layers of the actual space? Did that answer the question?
Yeah. Jonathan and I have talked a lot. Yeah, Jonathan and I have talked a lot personally and then shared on this podcast about our individual journeys in the performance and expression of gender and sexuality. I identify as a gay man. I'll let Jonathan identify himself, but we've all had our own journeys, as probably all queer people have, and continue to wrestle with as we, over our lifetime, experience the ongoing pressure of straight supremacy, just constantly, or like you alluded to, male supremacy as well, constantly trying to erode your identity, erode the avenues of your personal expression. And then so you sometimes find, it sounds like you're saying, and I've experienced, where it's like, wow, is this really who I am? Or is this expression actually an act of resistance? Am I so pushing back on social norms regarding masculinity or femininity that I'm actually distorting, may not be the right word, but maybe inadvertently emphasizing various facets of my personality to bring it forward? And who am I really, and who would I be really without swimming in this soup of bigotry? So that's what I want to ask you, Jody. It's like, do you feel like that's who you've become or are becoming? Do you feel like you are really kind of attaining the more authentic expression of yourself?
100%. Yeah, 100%. I definitely, it feels like it takes a really long time to figure out, or maybe it's like, you don't ever figure it out. You're like continual, like we change and morph and we find different things to figure out. And, I really feel that. And I do feel like this character work has been a great, tool to experiment with different ways in and out of that. I mean, even like I did this Peach Ditch, where I was like, I just want to be like a clown, and went really sort of I want to say traditional, but it was still a little bit abstracted, but, as traditional as I can get into clown and outfit. And I did this run of shows, and it was funny because I've been doing Sherdana for a long time. This was just in the last 5 years. And it was kind of the first moment where an audience member, I heard again that, like, is it a boy or a girl? And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I was just like, I want to be a clown. I wasn't thinking I want to be unrecognizable in my gender. I was just like, I want to be and it really surprised me. I was like, wow, that was not even on my mind. And it's kind of the interesting thing too about, I feel like that happens a lot in my work, where I'm just going towards an idea, and then there's a reaction to it that is about gender or expression that then has coined me like, Jody and Sherdana are really working on gender. And I'm like, well, yes, but also I just wanted to be a clown. And then the gender thing just came after the fact. And so cool. Like, yes, I guess that's in there, but it wasn't my initial hit. You know, I wasn't like, let me put on a costume that is genderless, or genderful, whichever way you want to look at it. And, so I feel like those things keep happening in the work for me. Which I don't exactly know what that means or what that says, but, maybe just that things are layered. And, maybe that's why actually earlier on when people were like, you're a drag queen, I was really resistant because I was like, I'm just doing this thing. I'm just trying to do this task. I'm just trying to make this atmosphere. And the way it was read. And I mean, I think then, you know, to be a conscientious artist, it means, okay, my way in was this and the audience is perceiving this. So like, now what's the next step? Like, do I want to go towards that or do I want to go away? Like the audience reaction can be a way to figure out what the next direction is. I figure so much out when you put something in front of people. It's really an amazing experiment.
I really love so many parts of this, right? There's as you were talking earlier, I was thinking about how much alter egos are baked into us in the queer community, how from a really young age we're kind of forced into developing alter egos to exist within the structures that are, you know, as they are. And then as you were talking just then, I'm like, and there's this really wonderful thing that happens when we step fully into exploring how we can express ourselves in the world, that leads people to have a deeper understanding of themselves, of the society in a wider context, and how we can all live a more deeply expressed life, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And so I suppose, I don't know if there's a question in here, as per, I kind of go on these little tangents, we'll see where we end up. But I sort of feel like there's a question in there about intention, right? It's like if we step out of trying to label everything and just lean into the act of expressing what comes naturally through us, then I don't know if there's a question in there. I kind of want to say, like, I'd like to know a bit more about your experience of that, of choosing not to label, almost, of just being present to your deepest expression.
Yeah, I mean, that just brought up I think the funny thing about, you know, being this clown character and then having somebody at the show, you know, it was very intimate. So like I heard it, like I was right next to the audience and like I heard this person ask the person next to them. And I think the thing is you get a little bit like, why do you even care? Why is that the question? I'm doing like this hour-long dance theater piece as this clown, and that's the question? There's so much other content in this piece, and you're still obsessed with if I'm a boy or a girl. Who cares at this point? Like, I think that's the funny thing to me is like the reminder, because I don't even think about it anymore. I'm just doing this character, and I know it is wrapped up in gender expression, but like that's not my focus. And so to still, after 20 years of doing this, have people ask the question, is a boy or a girl, is like, just makes me want to roll my eyes harder. Than I'm just like, yeah, really, that is the question. So I think I get there where I'm like, can we move on? I'm talking about a lot of other stuff in here. Like, that is not the question I'm proposing in this work.
You know, it's so funny that as artists, part of what we do, like you mentioned, is we have conversations with our audiences. And sometimes those conversations are literal. Like you were literally on stage having this kind of de facto conversation with this person, questioning your gender identity in that moment. And then you were having an emotional response to that maybe got expressed some way, even subconsciously, through the art that you were creating in that moment. That's the part of the beauty of live theater and stuff. And, you know, I think that we're having, as a nation, Jody and I live in the US, Jonathan lives in the UK. As a nation, a lot of us in the US are having conversations around race and gender. And I think what we have found is that we are mired in or married to our conventional social norms, our preconceived notions, prejudices, and biases around race and gender. I know for myself, in the art that I create, that is where I experience the greatest level of confusion and resistance, is around race and gender. So it doesn't surprise me that people in your audience are grappling with those as well. And then sometimes it just erupts out of them. They can't, it's so present with them. They're so filled with these questions. It just comes out of them. They can't even sit quietly. And as an art, it just leaps out of them, and they have to give voice to it. And, you know, so I'd like you to talk a little bit more around the conversations you have with your audience and what it feels like to get that feedback. Like you said, you start as an artist, you create a thing, then the audiences respond, and then it's like jazz. Then you respond to the audience's response, and it's that kind of dance, that kind of that jazz. So talk a little bit more about that conversation you're having and how it's been for you personally, and what it's like for you as an artist.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in an interesting moment because I've hit a place in my career where, you know, I've been in Seattle for 20 years and I've built an audience base, and it's sort of a double-edged sword where I'm like, it's really great. Like I know that I have access to a lot of different performing opportunities here because of the momentum that I've built over the 20 years. And that's really beautiful and exciting. And also the hard part about it is that the audience, they know me. They're like, oh, Sheridan is doing a show. I know what that's going to be. I don't need to go. I think I hit a point where people are like, oh, you're going to have a show. It's going to be sold out. You're going to have no problem. And I'm like, actually, that's not really what's going on anymore, because some people are, I mean, I have some diehard fans, but there's also people who are like, oh yeah, I've seen that. I know what that is. There's no priority in getting there. That's a very strange place to be in my career. Because you work so hard to build this momentum and build audience. And then you get to the point and then it's like, oh boy, like now it's a different kind of work. And then also I feel like there's more room for me to disappoint people because people have seen more of my work and they have expectations and they have things that they love out of me. And if I don't do the thing that they love, then they're like, oh, well, you know, we don't love Sheridan or that work anymore. And that is very difficult as an artist because I'm like, I'm just experimenting. I'm just trying stuff out. And I'm not necessarily an artist that finds a thing. You know, there's these artists that I keep bringing up Dina. I don't know why, because she's such a Seattle, you know, anchor.
Let me interrupt really quickly. Dina Martina is a local Seattle drag legend who's revered, and we'll link to her in the show notes as well. Sorry, Jody, go ahead.
Yeah. And, you know, she's amazing and hysterical, and I'm a mega fan and would go see anything she does. And, you know, she has a formula, like, you know what to expect when you go to the show. And I'm not really doing that formula. And so I can't quite maintain an audience like that. I think because I'm like, you never know what you're going to get. You know, like you might get an hour of me doing one thing. Like I love duration. You might get me in a theater. So like, you know, I have some audience that are like theater goers and they have expectations around theater and dance. And then I have drag world, you know, nightlife audience that has other expectations about what they want to see and what's fun to see. And I'm down for it, but it makes for a hard spot administratively, and it makes it feel like there can be a lot of audience disappointment in me in whatever way it goes. And then I had this experience of, you know, the pandemic, like everything stopped for a long time, and I kind of got back to some things this year, and it feels like everything that got canceled was rescheduled like in 4 months. So I was just out doing like residencies and things, which was really great. But I was like, can we spread it out a little bit? Because I don't know what's coming next. But anyway, so I was doing and making work outside of Seattle, and it was such a magical experience because I haven't really been doing that where people don't know me at all and don't know this character at all. And it was so delightful for me. I was like, I haven't had that experience in Seattle in a while where people are like, what the fuck is this? Like, I have no idea. I don't have any context. I've never seen anything like this. I don't know what is going on. Is this dance? Is it drag? Is it theater? And I was like, oh, I love that. And I miss that. And it's hard for me to get that in Seattle. Yeah. I mean, I will have like, you know, like some new people, but it was interesting to sort of put that on the table of my relationship as an artist to the city that you live in, and the importance of touring and getting to know other artists outside of where you live for your own, like for my own personal growth and the growth of the work. And because it gets into a place where I was like, oh, if I'm just making work in Seattle, like I have in my mind what Seattle has seen me do. And so it changes the work. Like you start to make work for the city because you're like, oh, they've seen me do this, they've seen me. And then to do work other places, I was like, oh, the freedom of it. They haven't seen me do shit. I can do some of the things that I love and have built myself on. And, you know, I think there's some pressure of an artist and I think this puts the pressure on the pressure to be like, I have to make something really new and really different every time. Like it has to be completely different than my last work. And that's just a lot of pressure to take on. So, you know, and then to really tangent this, it's like, this is all mixed up in sustainability. And like, I'm not in my 20s anymore where I'm just like, I don't know, I'm just going to be an artist and I'm sleeping on couches and who cares? I'm making art, whatever. And now I'm 42 and I'm like, well, I need to have insurance and maybe start a retirement fund. Like I have different needs, and I have majorly different needs around sustainability. And this is like the most difficult career choice for that. And living in Seattle. And so, you know, this feeling before in my 20s and some of my 30s where I was like, and I still feel this where I'm like, I don't care who comes. I will do a show for 5 people and I'm so happy with that. And I'm like happy to connect with whoever is there. And I'm not doing the work to like, fame is not really in my, I don't really care about that. I just want to do work. But then that's getting all fucked up because I'm like, but I need to make money. Like, I will do a show for 5 people, but also like I can't live off of ticket sales for 5 people. And it's really such a conflict. And I'm really struggling with it right now in particular, where I'm like, God, what am I going to do? Like, I don't really know what to do about it. And I've been very lucky to, I mean, I haven't had any other work in 10 years at least. Like, I've been making it happen. And I have very weird living situations. And that's, like, again, the needs are starting to change. And even in these ways that have made it available for me to be a working artist, like, they're not working anymore. And the idea that I would have to give up artistic opportunity to be able to live in an apartment makes me want to die. I'm like, really? I have to say no to artistic pursuits just so I can go get a restaurant job so that I have enough money to live in Seattle? Like, oh God. It's hard to feel then creatively free when it's so tied into basic needs. And then it gets into to like really go there. Then it gets into the whole thing like, oh, poor me. I don't get to be a working artist when there's other people like working in coal mines and, these terrible jobs where I'm like, shut the hell up, Jody, and just get another job. Like, how can I be complaining about that? And then I'm like, yes, but I do really believe art is important. And it's really what I'm best at. It's like I've cultivated my entire life to develop this really specific skill that relates to live performance and abstraction. And I'm really good at this one thing. And I've spent 40 years cultivating that. And it feels very sad to me that is not enough. It's not it's enough in the sense that like capitalism in America doesn't care about art as much to
there we go. I was waiting for
Bingo.
that.
We landed on it.
Yeah
and see, that's the thing where I'm like, I don't want to, I'm like, I don't want to complain about not being able to be an artist because it feels like a privilege, but it feels like a privilege to be an artist because of capitalism doesn't value all the different ways in which, people should be able to choose their career, so to speak.
Yeah. And then we have a global pandemic.
Of art.
Mm-hmm. And it gets highlighted.
Looming global recession, potential. Mm-hmm. Yeah, looming global recession. We have corporate greed, which we like to call inflation. We have potential stagflation. You alluded to the commodification of drag as an art form, much less the commodification of many of the arts writ large. You alluded to the unintended consequences of building a brand and the privileges that we have when seen through the lens of existing social norms. These are complex questions that it's like there are no answers. But I think the elephant in the room, and I'm judging that Jonathan agrees based on his reaction, is capitalism. That's what we've come down to, is that we've found ourselves born into this society that requires us to set aside certain facets of our personality, certain drives, certain inclinations, certain inspirations, certain modes of expression in the name of being a cog in a machine. And it's heartbreaking. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. I used to be a classical musician as a full-time job. I used to play in symphonies and teach at the university, at various universities. And I realized early on that I was not going to set the world on fire with my flute playing. I was a classical flautist. And I made the heartbreaking choice that also because of the way careers in that mode of expression worked is you would have to travel kind of from small town to small town, working your way up the regional orchestra system and the regional university system. And I was so physically afraid of living in those communities as a queer person that I was just like, nope, I'm not good enough to just leap into a nationally known symphony in a major metropolitan area, but I would rather be alive. And so I just made that decision to go that route. Lots of other queer people have made different decisions. And I just made the decision to jump into the corporate career game and to set that aside. And so it's so heartrending to hear from a working artist's perspective the tough choices that you face, and to think about my tough choices as a non-working artist, somebody who does it for as an avocation or for personal enjoyment, and to kind of reflect back on the roads of where life has taken us. And but I think it's so important we put blame where it should reside, which is straight white cis male supremacy, which goes hand in hand with capitalism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, seriously. It's really,
Wah, wah.
I'm just like holding on. I'm like really just holding on and seeing so many artists my age have to pivot to different careers, and it is heartbreaking, and it feels like you're just beat down to making a new decision, and I'm just not interested in anything else. And that might sound bratty, or I don't know. I mean, I'm interested in some other things, but maybe it's more just like feeling resistant in that way of like, no, what? No, I don't, I don't want to give in to it all.
Well, you know what, Jody, the world craves, the universe craves the fullest expression of your gifts. Now we just have to figure out how to get there. And speaking about Jody, all the Jodys in the world, all the artists out there who are listening to this, who are struggling with these same issues. Seattle is a bit of a wreck at the moment. One of the most expensive cities in the world. Many venues have closed down. Many artists have moved away. Many other artists have gone back to school or changed careers, maybe never going back again. And so we're losing the mentorship, the apprenticeship from one artist to the next about how to even be an artist and practice the business of art, to live the life of an artist. That's just going away. And so it's never been more challenging, I suspect, to be an artist as the relentless pressure of capitalism continues to condense all modes of expression into commoditized, perfectly labeled formulas that are easy to sell and market to further the aims of capitalism.
Exactly. And I'm like, even in this is also just to bring it back around, why then when I'm in a show and somebody's like, is that a boy or a girl? I'm like, who cares? I'm trying to survive. Who cares about that question? I just want to make art. Like, God, I go there a little bit at this point, but even though I know that's still valid and it's still in the work, and then you like, I'll be at the point where I'm like, fuck it, I quit. Like, this is the last show I'm going to do. This is it. And then I'll get like, somebody will send me an email that is like, your work has changed my life in some way. And I'm like, God damn it. That's exactly why I'm doing this. And like, enough to just to feel like, oh yeah, it really is important. And also that's how I feel. It's not even just about me and my work. my life has been changed by seeing art. Like, I love it. I love it so much. And so it's important to me to have it for my own consumption and witnessing of people. Yeah. So yeah. That's kind of where I'm at with audience.
I can't help but wonder if what the universe is craving right now from artists is direct relevancy to social justice struggles. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things I love so much about your art, Jody, is that you are unafraid to take that on either implicitly or explicitly. I feel like many local arts organizations that I've been working with are struggling to make that connection. A lot of it is due to the mode of artistic expression doesn't necessarily lend itself to making socio-political statements. It makes it a little more challenging. In other cases, the organizations have been, frankly, elitist, racist, classist clubs for decades, and they're reckoning with ideas of equity and sharing power. But, one of the things I love about you and your alter ego, Sherdana, is that you are unafraid to take us there. I mean, I know you're talking about how challenging it is, but, the way that I see your art is that you often lull us into a false sense of security. You put us at ease with the approachability of Sherdana's charming childlike demeanor and dress, costumes, expression. You build tension with our expectations and you release it with comedy. And then as we're laughing, you go in with the shiv and you show us something about who we really are and who you really are and all that we could be and might become. And that is to me, that is the magic of Jody and Sherdana, that final step. There are lots of comics out there who master tension and release, but that moment when we think as an audience we're at ease, and so we're fully open to receive your message, and you go in there with that sucker punch, that's my favorite part. And so I can't help but wonder if this moment was made for you in some way, even with all the challenges that are frankly never going to go away. But even with all those challenges, I can't help but wonder if what the universe is craving from you is exactly what you have to offer.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I do, there is a little, my work has been very much about sort of pushing against the celebration of the patriarchy. And like the last show that I just did, Goodnight Cowboy, was definitely about toxic masculinity and getting to push against that in so many different ways, which I feel like is something I work with a lot in my shows, just because it is so pervasive and so relentless to deal with on a day-to-day. So I'm like, well, I guess this show's just about that again, because there's just so much of it. Like, we're not done with this topic yet. But in the other way, you work with two Philly artists, and it kind of started. It started in one, how process goes. You start somewhere, and the place we were starting from is the world is made for twos, and I wonder, like, there must be a tie to the patriarchy for that. I mean, I guess it ties into like straightness and heteronormativity and
marriage,
like the goal to get married, and and so everything's easier. Like, I've been single for a very long time, and I'm like, wow, it's really difficult. Like, things are really expensive as a single person. Or like, we were kind of joking because I went to Disney World with two friends, and they're a couple. We went all together, and it felt like the entire trip was negotiating who sat alone, because all the rides are for two people. So like, we were always in this constant time of like, okay, who wants to ride with who, or who's going to sit with the stranger, and so it feels like the world is built that way. And a lot of times as a single person navigating it, it feels that way a lot. But anyways, we started there and kind of moved into throughout the process, which I think harkens back to this larger conversation we were talking about of we've moved into the question, is it worth it? And just as a general question, like the small things in our lives that you do just daily, like, is it worth it to make my bed in the morning? Is it worth it to shower today? Or to the bigger things of like, is it worth it to take this job or to leave this? Or, I mean, honestly, even into like, is it worth it to be alive? Like, which goes in that bigger question of, or is it worth it to be an artist? Is it worth it to have art? Is it worth it to have a particular relationship? It's a question that I feel like we do daily and don't realize. And I think everybody's negotiating these, is it worth it, all the time, and don't really realize that that's the question. And so I do think that like that is my interest as an art maker, and what you were saying, that like, is it worth it can be comical and funny and small and like no big deal, but it can really be like the heaviest question you've ever asked yourself. And that is such gold to mine for me, and what I love to bring to those audiences. So I think maybe the next piece is sort of about the struggle.
It's kind of got nihilist vibes, right? And that kind of constant grapple for meaning. And yet what I know and what I see in the world is that there are so many people trying to make us take on their meaning of life and the world and the way it's to be seen. And you can take white supremacy and male supremacy as prime examples of that. And what I often see in the queer community, and the more liberal community at large is a lack of willingness to project meaning or to stand for meaning in a way that shouts louder than those who are projecting their meaning upon the world, right? And what I see in what you do is this way of doing that in a way that's almost palatable but super expressive. And so I'd be really interested to see what you do with, is it worth it? I don't know if there's a question in there. Britt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. It's like I feel all the negatives, for lack of a better word, of that question, and also ultimately, I do believe it's worth it. Mm. I believe it's worth the struggle. It's worth the risk, whatever way in the world. I believe like relationship is worth it, and art is worth it, and people are worth it. And like, our existence is worth it. And also like, it's hard to not struggle with existential feelings. And so I think my own struggle with that, or Sherdana's struggle with that, lets other people take that in, and is like, I think maybe it is with Sher. Like, I think people, of course, we like numb out. We numb out so much. And because of capitalism and the patriarchy, like, we've turned into these machines that just numb out. You go and you do this thing and you're in and I do feel like Sherdana is used to be like, hey, like, let me shake you out of this and remember that we're humans, and we're just, and also like, what are we? Who are we? Like, there's also a question. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out too. But I think, myself as Jody, like, I've definitely had existential questions for my whole life. It's just kind of who I've been. And so I'm like, how is it that people aren't questioning their existence every day? I'm literally questioning my existence every day. And I know there are some people out there, and there's some people that don't even think about it. They're like, I haven't thought about that. I don't understand that, but I think it's good to question it and to look at it and
Yeah.
Because I think it brings us back to those.
Yeah, one of the insidious aspects of capitalism is the relentless pressure you referenced. And so many of us lack the capacity to ask ourselves those questions because we're working multiple jobs or living in intergenerational family households, and we're just exhausted. We have COVID, we have this or that, dealing with all the bigotry and the bias out there. And it's just absolutely exhausting. So in a way, it's a privilege, but I think it's also, for those of us who have that privilege, a requirement. So we're recording this episode in early July of 2022, where we had several horrible things happen in the news yet again. Another mass shooting in the U.S. over the July 4th holiday. We've had another Black person killed by white police officers, shot at 90 times, his body riddled with 60 bullets for a traffic violation. More information is still coming out on that, but the initial information is pretty shattering. And then, of course, with the setting aside of Roe v. Wade, which sends abortion rights back to our fragmented state legislatures, which is absolutely terrifying. So that's what I meant earlier when I was talking about what the universe is craving. I wonder, for those of us who have this inclination of existential philosophizing and wondering and who have these artistic talents, I wonder if part of the requirement of the gift is aligning them, connecting them with meaningful social justice outlets, so that we can, reach people. I think Jonathan was alluding to this earlier, where we can reach people in multiple ways. We can reach them through the news. We can reach them through dinner time conversations. And then we have this framework of art and humor, especially, where we can maybe bypass some of their defenses and take them to a really sacred place where they're forced to reckon with their beliefs and all that is true in this world and sit with it for a certain amount of time. And then maybe inevitably that changes them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the things that came out of that show, Ditch, was, which was trying to sort of make a matriarchal utopia as an idea, and there's failure. But one of the emails I got was a woman who came with her husband and her two sons, and they were just like, oh, there's a free thing at the museum, let's go. Like, had no idea. And I got this beautiful email that she was so taken and like really understood the content, like it hit her, and had like went home, and she said first she picked a fight with her family and then realized why she was picking that fight. And then they had basically a family meeting about like her experience as the mother in that, that space with raising two sons and having a husband. And I think that's just what you're saying. It's like, that was a surprise. Like, they didn't know what they were coming to witness. And it sort of sparked this conversation about gender and politics that starts in the home.
Yeah. What are we going to do about, that's a beautiful, beautiful moment. I'm so glad they shared it with you. And I'm sitting here wondering, like, what are we literally going to do? Like, Jonathan and I were chatting before you came on today about the reproductive rights activism and art in the U.S., all the myths and lies there are told daily about abortion and reproductive freedom and reproductive health. And we're just sort of like flummoxed, like, what are we going to do? Literally, what is going to happen? It feels like we're under, in the U.S. anyway, it feels like we're under daily assault, moving from, just careening from one outrage to the next. How can we marshal our resources and band together and start to address this stuff?
I know. I mean, I feel so similarly. And honestly, when the Roe v. Wade thing came out, it was another moment where I was like, well, who cares about being an artist? I better go like sign up to do something else. Like, again, does it matter? Like, I don't actually know if what I'm doing matters to that. And even though I do make like political based work, and it really does, you know, conjure those feelings of like needing extremeness. And, you know, it's kind of funny because at the beginning of the, like in 2019, going into like the very beginning of 2020, I was making a piece with Washington Ensemble Theater about abortion. Mm-hmm. And we basically had researched, and we were working with Shout Your Abortion. We were making, like, we had a script, and we had one rehearsal, and then the pandemic shutdown happened. And we were like, well, this doesn't matter anymore. Now we're just surviving. And, you know, the pandemic happened, you know, and we're like getting past that. And so it's just interesting to come back to, like, there was problems then, and it's just getting worse, you know. And I talked to Maggie, who works at Washington Ensemble Theater, and she's like, well, we have this show. We never got to put it up. We can just, let's just like revisit it and get it up to date. And like, we could put it up. But I think it feels sad and depressing to, I was thinking about this. Where was it? Like in Argentina or somewhere, where like when their, you know, rights were being taken away, like there was just a massive protest about abortion, and they actually like changed it and made it. And I was like, I don't feel like that would ever happen here. Like, I can't see that many people coming together. And I was like, why is that? Is it because the US is so spread out? Or, and then I was like, or is it just because we've been taught in the US to be individuals, and like, we're so individual focused that coming together and with that much power is something that will never, I don't know. It's just a question. I don't really know, but
let me ask a really provocative question before Jonathan, I know, can see him itching to jump in. For all the listeners in our audience who are not able to bear children, because obviously it's not just women that can bear children, what would it take for us to express our fury, our collective fury at this decision? Why are we placing it on other people? And you know, what if all the non-child bearing people in the world staged a workout, and just refused to go to work for a week until this is addressed? Or if we staged a march on Washington, what might then the response be, to Jody's point, instead of requiring those that are bearing the brunt of the trauma to also bear the responsibility to lead the social justice movement, which seems like not only a double bind, but just a huge slap in the face. Just kind of a rhetorical question for all of us to kind of think about. And what is it going to take for us to express our collective fury and outrage?
I'll chime in then, shall I? Because, you know, clearly there's something going on up here. Yeah, I don't know. Like my personal view on it is that if you identify as male and you care about the people in your life who identify as female, or, you know, non-binary and childbearing, then you have a level of responsibility to fight for them, and also to understand your responsibility. And what I see, that has been the narrative for the longest time, is that it is only the childbearing person's responsibility, but also we're going to take away your ability to have responsibility for your body. And I really struggle with this idea that men absolve themselves of responsibility in this situation. You know, if you have a penis and can ejaculate, then you are responsible. You are responsible for the act of sex, for conception, and I just it enrages me. And men get to stand up and fight for the childbearing people in their life. I am sickened by the constant desire to take away bodily autonomy, whilst also taking no responsibility, none whatsoever. I can't wrap my head around it. That's my take. There's probably a lot more in there.
I think it's even worse. Real quick, Jody, before you chime in, I think it's even worse, Jonathan, than you paint. Like, as usual, I'm the pessimist.
Yes.
Like, I think it's actually that we're real happy to reap the unearned advantages of abortions as people who don't ever require them, per se, with regards to our bodies, without fighting for them or incurring any cost. So we're just stealing from people's lives. And so what I mean by that is listeners may not know that depending upon how you define the procedure or the term abortion, abortive procedures can be used in fertility treatments like IVF, or can be used in forms of contraception like IUD. That benefits all of society, not just the person experiencing the treatment. So we're real happy to reap the rewards without incurring any of the costs. And it's just another way of saying that we stand with you as long as it doesn't inconvenience us in any way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the heartbreaking, searing truth of so many liberals in Seattle, so many Democratic politicians, so many like hashtag BLM, hashtag pride, and we're not going to do anything about it. We do not want to be inconvenienced in any way. Yeah. And so that's why I think Jonathan and I are challenging all of us to find ways, because I'm like Jonathan, I experienced a level of rage when that decision was announced I didn't frankly think possible. And so how we effectively harness and channel that outrage these days feels like part of being an American. And so I challenge all of us to meditate on that and hold our fury and then find constructive means of expression, personally and collectively. Jody, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I have two like main thoughts about it. I feel like you're right on it. I think there's a problem with responsibility, which is the same thing with racism. I feel like for white folks particularly, they're like, well, it doesn't affect me. You know, it's the same thing with abortion. Like, well, it doesn't really affect me. So, you know, what am I going to do about it sort of attitude? Which goes back to my thought about like the individualism that we've been taught here. It's like, it's somebody else's problem. And I think, you know, there's also like the really heartbreaking thing about it is that all these people in power who have money, they're still going to have access.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're still going to get abortions. They're still going to have abortions in their life because they can access it and they have the money and the resources. And so it's so infuriating that it feels like a political move that, you know, is really hurting so many people of color and underprivileged people. And like that just, it really does build the rage. And then also I think it comes back to like the build of the patriarchy where like, you know, folks without uteruses like have not been taught or understand what the fuck is going on or what it takes to be pregnant, or, you know, it just reminds me of like, you know, the education around bodies and what
basic biology
and what actually is basic biology. I mean, it reminds me of like, what was that thing about the woman who was going to space for like a month and they were like, do you need, it's like 200 tampons.
Yeah.
It's like, you gotta be fucking kidding me that those scientists don't know about periods that intensely. You know, I feel like that filters into this, like, I don't know anything about bodies with uteruses and I haven't been taught anything, and I haven't been taught that it's okay to know anything because of the patriarchy.
And I can't even be bothered to Google it. I'm a scientist. I'm real happy to express my ignorance and privilege publicly on behalf of an entire governmental organization. I can't even be bothered to type in a 5-second Google query.
Yeah.
It's enraging.
It's so pervasive and really enraging. And like, to tangent a little bit, it reminds me, like, you know, which we already know, but in the queer and drag community, you know, like all the pussy jokes, that's still, I mean, it's getting less and less, which is great. But I mean, I went to a show of this, you know, really amazing queer progressive sort of drag, whatever artist, I'm not going to say who it is, but who made a quick off the cuff, like, joke about pussies that was derogatory. And like, I was there watching everybody who I considered most liberal queer community laugh. And I was so annoyed by it. And I also know that sometimes those things slip through and you're on stage and you're like, oh shit, I said that and I shouldn't have said that. I get that. So I'm not one to like cancel, but it was very hard. It was like heartbreaking to me. And then I got in an argument with somebody at the show. It was like an adjacent friend where, you know, we were like, oh, how's, you know, you enjoying the show? And I was like, yeah, I was like, well, that one joke was like unfortunate, but other than that, that's all I said. That one joke was unfortunate, but I'm really enjoying the rest of the show. And I love this, blah, blah, blah. And like this person, you know, who identifies as a man, what, you know, a queer man, was like, really, really got on me about it. And was like, oh God, like, I was just like, so like, oh, you're so sensitive. And, you know, they didn't mean it that way. And I'm like, hold the phone here. Like, first of all, they did mean it in a derogatory way. And second of all, like, I'm the one with the vagina. So like, it was so, it's just heartbreaking that it's like, even in our communities, we're still dealing.
Yeah. Vaginas are always up for debate and discussion, and it's just ridiculous. It's like, we don't need to hear any more hot takes on vaginas. It's like, we got it, we're good. No. You know, it's a little, you know, it's like, we're done. You know, the other kind of predictable conversation I found enraging about abortion is trauma centricity. So what I mean by that is the mainstream media, for all sorts of reasons, tend to frame abortion conversations around outlandishly traumatic events, like one that was in the news recently with a 10-year-old being raped and impregnated, which is horrific and horrible and needs to be dealt with. But the truth is, most people seeking abortions are married heterosexual straight women who have children already. And the truth is, if you believe in reproductive freedom, you believe probably in all of it, and abortion is healthcare, and it shouldn't have to be steeped in trauma to gain our empathy, care, and concern. And when we frame conversations in that way, we inadvertently, at best, marginalize all the important healthy choices that people are making every day for all sorts of reasons that are frankly none of our business. And it kind of creates this ongoing culture of trauma porn where we're, you know, kind of racing to the bottom for shock value and clickbait because we think maybe we can win some people over on the other side, but inadvertently we're casting aside a whole swath of the community. It's just absolutely enraging.
It's really hard. And I think the thing that I run into too is like, you know, in this discussion of how politically we're getting so polarized between like the right and the left, and how, you know, we need to listen to each other more or have more conversations. And the thing I run into with that is, but I think like with some of these issues, they're just wrong. And so how do you, like, I really, you know, because my mom and I talk about this where it's like, yeah, but when you're talking to that other person who's very anti-choice and they're like, I'm right, you're wrong, then it's like, well, we both could, like, you know, how do you decide who actually is wrong? But I'm like, no, but they really are wrong. And like, actually, like, people having body autonomy and all that is actually the correct thing. And so it's like, I don't even know how to come together on this, or if it's just a generational shift, like, is anti-choice folks more part of the older guard, or like, will it just be like more people are going to be pro-choice, and eventually it'll, like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, I don't really understand how to change anybody who is so anti-choice. Like, in my mind, I'm like, they're not going to change. Like, really, like, a conversation with me about abortion, is that really going to change their mind? Probably not. I don't know what would, unless that person needed an abortion. Like, it was their personal experience. Mm-hmm. They were like, oh, shoot, I got pregnant and I don't actually want to have this child. So I think that comes up for me, where I'm just like, how are we going to do, just what you were saying before, like, how are we going to do this? How is this going to happen?
I think the reality is that, you know, if you really look at stats, the minority are actually those people, but they speak the loudest. They put people into positions of power, etc. And so we end up in a position where they are gaming the system in their favour. And so really the only way that we win is not actually through that kind of one-on-one discourse, but it is through doing what you're doing, right? Which is creating art that shows people a different way of seeing things, but also to be out there and vote. And unfortunately, left-leaning folk often sit in the land of apathy quite a lot of the time, and aren't as active, and do sit on their laurels a lot of the time. And so I think really the answer is, yeah, in doing that. Unfortunately, we've lost Britt. And it looks like his internet's gone out. So I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up there. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jody. It's been an absolute pleasure. What we'll do is we'll make sure that all of the links to you are down in the show notes. But if there are any particular ways people can get in touch with you, specifically that you'd like to share with us now is the time to do it.
I mean, really, my Instagram, that's where I post all my show stuff, which is just Sherdana, like at Sherdana Sinatra. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's an email on my website if, you want to chat more about that. Yeah, it's been so great to be here.
Yes, an absolute pleasure. And yes, as Britt always says, if you've listened this far, congratulations on making it through another Not Going Quietly episode. It's been a pleasure having you, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Not Going Quietly with co-hosts Jonathan Beal and Britt East.
Thanks so much for joining us on this wild ride as we explore ways to help everyone leap into life with a greater sense of clarity, passion, purpose, and joy.
Check out our show notes for links, additional information, and episodes located on your favorite podcast platform.